Hello, this is TelecomTV. We are on the road. We're in Dusseldorf in Germany at the SDN and OpenFlow World Congress. I'm Martin Warwick and I'm talking with Dr. Jai Menon, who is VP and Chief Research Officer at Dell. Jai, welcome and thanks for talking to us. A couple of questions for you, well more than two actually, but we'll get through them.
Thank you, Martin.
It's said, it is believed, and we know this is true, that SDN and NFV will enable operators to build more efficient networks. Given that, I'd like to look at sort of business transformations and the way things are going, and if we could tell the difference between the hope, the expectations that were there a couple of years ago, and the more solid reality of today. And I'd like to begin by saying this. We've heard an enormous amount about the agility and other benefits afforded by SDN and NFV and its potential to allow telcos to compete properly with OTT. What do you think are going to be the key services or applications that telcos will be enabled to launch that will allow them to undertake that real competition?
Great. Martin, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's exciting to be here, and thanks very much for the opportunity. You know, I do think that both SDN and NFV are very transformative technologies, but I'd like to begin by sort of pointing out that a lot of people talk about them in the same breath, but it's useful to sort of separate them out a little bit, because then we can talk about each a little differently. SDN, as you know, is it really started out in the data center and not so much in the carrier world. NFV, of course, is very focused on the carrier world. That said, I think my point of view is that we almost, I can speculate. I can give you some examples of the kind of functions that are going to be possible, and I'll start with a few of those. But I want to couch it in the following terms. Part of the magic of what this allows you to do is it allows people that know nothing about networking, really smart people that just know how to write software, to come in and provide capabilities to the network operators and the service providers that would have been very hard to do in today's model, where a very few number of vendors control everything top to bottom. And so by providing, for example, with NFV, this infrastructure and a programming paradigm that lets someone off the street almost that doesn't even know how to spell networking create capabilities, I think that's where some of the whole power of this comes about. Now, what could they do? Well, I can give you examples. I think the network operators could, for example, provide content caching in an Akamai style, that they could provide the infrastructure to allow this kind of content caching that Akamai does. They could do, for example, a lot of things in the mobility management today. Enterprises allow employees to bring their own device, being able to manage that, being able to do that in a seamless way. No matter where you are with your device, sometimes you're within the enterprise wall, sometimes you're in an internet cafe, sometimes you're working from home. You want the same level of access into the enterprise, and I think the operators will be able to provide that, switch seamlessly from Wi-Fi to cellular to other kinds of things, use both when the application requires it, and the application doesn't even know that you're being seamlessly switched one to the other. These are all examples of, I think, the kind of capabilities that become enabled, but the truth of the matter is, we can all speculate, but in fact, someone out there is going to do something that neither you or I are going to be able to guess, and that's the real power of what this is going to enable.
As far as NFV is concerned, and we're looking at that because it relates directly to telcos.
Yes.
Telcos are having to come to grips with the fact that IT in data centers is a different kettle of fish, and it has literally a different language.
Yes.
It has different technologies, and those technologies are being taken and being applied into a telecoms environment which is completely unused. It is a foreign language to them.
Yes, yes.
We have seen 3 years of, this is the third year of this event. First time in Darmstadt in Germany, 300 people there. the buzz begins. Last year in Bad Homburg, a remarkable increase. This year, again, very, very busy, very vital stuff, great networking, a very popular, influential and informed group of people. That said, I'd like to ask you, what do you think the difference is between the perceptions and expectations at Darmstadt a couple of years ago to today? What has changed? What has changed for the better and what has changed for the worse?
So I think, first of all, NFV is going to be a very long journey. And you know, I don't come from a networking background myself, so I like to use general analogies. And the analogy I'd like to use is going back 10 years, we started talking about virtualization in the data center. And that was a journey that took about 8 to 10 years. We didn't have any virtualized workloads about 10 years ago. Today, 80% of the workloads in a data center are virtualized. And that's the kind of journey we're going to be on with NFV. So we have to be in it for the long haul. This is a long haul, and it'll be about 10 years before 80% of these functions that are in hardware today are going to be virtualized. Now, with that said, it's interesting to me. One of the things that I think I see really interesting, I'll give Dell as a good example. There's people here from Dell that are not from networking. You know, I would say that the kind of people that attended the earlier conferences were hardcore networking folks. And I think the big difference is that there's a realization, and here's the way I look at NFV. To me, NFV is actually cloud. That's it. We know cloud. We understand cloud in the data center. We understand the value proposition. We understand why it's good. At the end of the day, what's NFV? It's got standard servers, standard storage, standard networking. You virtualize it, and then you run these applications in these virtual machines. You deliver the service over a cloud. You've got some software to manage all of this infrastructure. The only difference is the kind of applications that you're running in those virtual machines. They're different from email or database or some of these other things we run in a data center. But if you keep that in mind, I think it's a very powerful analogy. Think of it as cloud, and we know a lot, and a lot of other people know about cloud. So the person that's here from Dell actually is the key architect behind Dell's Cloud Manager product. And what he's seeing is, wait a minute, this is a lot like cloud. It's just a different kind of application. What is it that I can do with that software that could enable this NFV industry? In fact, at Dell, we use the term high velocity cloud just to make a difference in our minds between cloud in the enterprise, in the data center, and the cloud that the carriers really will need. And we call it high velocity for two reasons, because there are two ways in which it's different. One is packet velocity. You've got to be able to push a lot of packets per second, because that's what networking functions are about. You don't need that in email. You need that for these kind of applications. Sure. Number two is service velocity. You've got to be able to bring up, tear down, and grow and shrink and scale the kind of services, at a speed and agility that you don't really need in a data center, where it's okay to take a month to bring it up, make sure it's robust, and then let it run. And so both those elements are about velocity, velocity of the service, velocity of the packets that you're handling, and that's why we use the term high velocity cloud. But I think keeping that analogy in mind is really helpful, because I think that if the NFV group can pull together more of this ecosystem and more of people that know what a cloud is, I think it'll be dramatically useful to NFV. But we're on a journey. What we're seeing is more people getting attracted into it, and from the way I see it, it's not a question of will it happen. It's simply a question of timing. How soon? When will it happen? But this is one of those transformative things that we should all be excited about being a part of.
Thanks, Jai. So is Dell involved in proof of concepts we can see here at the show?
Yes, we are very much involved. We think that it's very important to take abstract concepts and quickly drive them to implementation. And we were so eager to become a part of the POCs when the HCISG organization announced that they were going to open up for POCs, that we signed up to be part of the very first POC along with a bunch of other partners, such as Overture and Enterprise Web and several other partners, that in fact, if you walk down the hallway here, you'll see the POC labeled ETSI POC number 1 is the one in which we have been involved. And it was as early as March of 2013 that we signed up to become part of this POC. Now, the key part of this POC, and one of the key things we're trying to do with the POC, is if you think about NFV, there's really 3 pieces to it. There's an infrastructure piece, which is the hardware, the servers, the storage, the networking, and the low-level software that manages that infrastructure. There are the VNFs themselves, the functions, the software functions that run on that infrastructure. And then there's all the management and orchestration software that manages both the infrastructure and the VNFs. And what we did in our POC is we have a separate group of vendors responsible for each of those 3 pieces. And this is very important because we want to demonstrate and we want to define the interfaces that make this possible, that you don't have to buy all the piece parts from the same vendor. So you do not have to buy a VNF and the management of that VNF from the same vendor. You don't have to buy the hardware from the same vendor. So in fact, what we're trying to show is what does it take to get a VNF from vendor A, a management software from vendor B, and infrastructure from vendor C. How should those interfaces be defined? And I think this is going to be very critical to the service providers, because a lot of what they want to move away from is the model of today, in which essentially they have to buy the function, the management, and the hardware infrastructure all from the same vendor. Now they will have choice. Now they will have openness, and it's a key concept for us to make sure that these interfaces remain open. So we're trying to learn as much as possible about what these interfaces should be, so that exactly what I said can be enabled. Vendor A doing one thing, vendor B doing the management, vendor C doing the infrastructure. This is the vision that we want to make sure comes true with NFV.
Thank you. One last question. I'm just going to flick my paper over a minute. Bear with me. We've been talking about transformation of technology, and we're also talking about transformation of business. I'd like to address that in the last question, if I might. We know that SDN and NFV are now as much about business transformation as they are about technology transformation. In your view, what are the most important things that service providers, telcos, operators need to do from a business transformation perspective to take full and complete advantage of SDN and of NFV?
Yeah, I think that the return of investment on this approach really comes from three areas. It's, I think as a business, they're going to be able to save CapEx, they're going to save OpEx, and third, they're going to get new sources of revenue. And we talked about some of those new sources of revenue at the very beginning of this discussion.
Yep.
And I think one of the important changes that telcos will have to consider as they go through this is very similar to the changes I described of what was happening with the conference. I think that increasingly the kind of people that they have to bring into the organization have to know a lot more about software, because we're really moving from a hardware, networky kind of organization to one that is going to be much more software-centric. We have to have the telcos think in broader terms, like, hey, this is a cloud. How do we manage the cloud? How do we operate the cloud? They have to move into into becoming more like the other cloud operators in the world, whether it's Amazon or whoever, or even Dell, which is in the middle of being a cloud brokerage business. And I think these are some of the kinds of things that are going to be important for telcos to keep in mind as they move forward.
Jai Menon, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Martin.